What's up, everybody? It's Drew. This is No Set Path. Welcome back to the show. This week's guest is Haskell Wexler Award-winning cinematographer David Kruta. Dave's a New York-based DP who I first discovered through his short-form narrative work and who's gone on to lens feature film projects like Black Friday starring Bruce Campbell and Agent Game starring Mel Gibson. Dave's also the founder of the Cinematography Salon, which started life as a Facebook group and has grown into a bi-coastal community, tens of thousands of members strong. They even have a very excellent podcast in their own right, so I highly suggest you check that out. We talk about art, identity, community, career, AI, food, all kinds of things, and I'm so glad you're here to check this one out. Whether you're on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get this podcast, a 5-star review always helps out the show, and if you're streaming this on YouTube, a thumbs up or subscribe certainly helps us out there as well. Without any delay, here's my interview with cinematographer David Kruta. Thanks for coming on the show, Dave. I really appreciate it. I feel like this has been a long time coming because I've been following you around for a little while. We met in person once.
We did
at some studio party. Was it one of the early ones?
It was our second official salon holiday party.
Okay. The longer I've been following you, the more real you try to keep it. Especially now, we're recording this in 2023 and work has been weird for our industry, for lack of a better term, for basically the entire year. When we were emailing back and forth, you were really interested in talking about like identity and community and all these things that I think will really play into that. But I am curious on the identity side, how long did you grow up outside of the US before you moved here?
I was 6 when we moved here.
As someone who's been here my entire life, how does being someone who's come from another country and now, has been here for so long, how does that play into the identity part for you, even now fully into adulthood and things of that nature?
Yeah, so I don't know. I think for a long time I struggled with it a lot more than I do now, but kind of straddling, 2 cultures and 2 countries was always a little rough. Like, I grew up being bullied pretty heavily, and, some of these kids, they would call me a communist and an alien and, all sorts of like outsider names. Whereas, if I went back to, the Czech Republic and spent time with my family, they would see me as the American. And so,
right.
Because I have a bit of an accent in my Czech. So, it's very easy to kind of pick me out and say, okay, this is the guy that came over here. He's got newer clothes than us and he speaks with an accent and he doesn't know our culture as well as we do. So I never felt like I fit in there either. But I think as I get older, I'm becoming more okay with myself and okay being a little different. I think also people have become more accepting, especially the last few years. I think there's been a big push to be accepting of people that are different.
It sounds like you were kind of riding this gray area for a little while where it's like, no matter where you landed, somebody was kind of always giving you a little bit of judgment. But, that being said, diverse backgrounds kind of gravitate to New York City, which is where you've been for how long now?
New York. I moved here 2011, I think. So that puts me at about 12 years in New York.
And did you start your cinematography career there, or were you working somewhere else beforehand?
Well, I originally started up in Boston and I was shooting, little projects here and there and eventually fell into DITing, joined the union, kept shooting and eventually moved to New York. And about a year into being here, I decided to go full-time DP.
How long were you in Boston for?
Probably about 6 years, something like that.
Oh, yeah, right on. Yeah. I lived in Coolidge Corner for like 3 or 4 years out in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I love the theater there.
Yeah, the Coolidge Corner Theater is legit. I saw some midnight showings of, Back to the Future and some other 80s classics. So yeah, it's a great spot. What does that come up look like for you in New York? Because, my road's a little bit different. I'm a self-taught filmmaker. I got into a rough spot and I couldn't make any money doing music, so I had to teach myself how to do something else. But, I'm curious what being a DIT and being in the industry and then just doing like a role shift looked like for you. Do you feel like that was easier, more difficult potentially?
If you're looking for answers, I don't have any. That's the truth.
That's a great response.
Yeah, it's just been a series of educated guesses forever. I didn't go to film school either. I don't have a background in this. Like I was going to go to culinary school. And I decided I didn't want to I didn't want to work in a kitchen for the rest of my life, and, take the passion out of something that I really liked, which is cooking. And I still have that passion till today. So, it's like jumping from DIT to DP. I would hit up a lot of my, producers that I had worked with. Hey, I'm a DP now. I can operate, et cetera, et cetera. And, a few of them would say like, congrats. And most would just ignore the emails. And that was about it. So it took a lot of convincing to get any of them to take me seriously. So most of those jobs didn't happen until years down the road. But, New York, when I moved here, I think there were just a lot of kind of younger up and coming directors. And, I was lucky to make a few connections, and it clicked, and, we got to do some really cool work. And most of them moved up through the ranks, started working on bigger things, left me behind, and I still had to go make my own way.
Yeah, I feel like your initial response was spot on, and pretty much a common tale for everybody, no matter the role, no matter, what you do, especially in the film industry. It's kind of like nothing makes sense. Nobody has any answers, but it there's a big luck factor, I feel like, in a lot of that stuff. Or, it's either luck or attrition, right? It's like, how long can you last, or how long can you outlast, rather, the other people who just kind of bail and say, okay, I'm going to go do something else.
That is what I've heard. It's who lasts the longest gets the jobs.
It's totally, it's totally a game of attrition. But also, I feel you on, not wanting to tarnish something that you feel really passionate about and potentially ruin it for you. I know you have a passion for cooking, so I'm glad you kept that safe and sacred for yourself.
Yeah, totally. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. It's not that I don't love filmmaking. I love filmmaking, but
of course,
cooking, I can go to the store and I can grab some ingredients and I can make something that I'm, proud of and be happy about it. I can't just get up one morning and decide I want to shoot a feature. There's a whole lot more to it. There are other people involved. There's a lot of money involved. So, given that distinction, I think it makes sense to keep cooking a passion and to, still love my job when I can do it. But that's my job.
Well, there's also something to be said about just having, for some reason, the analogy of loud versus quiet comes to mind. And I don't know why that pops in my head, but it's like, filmmaking, especially like feature filmmaking, of which you have way more experience than I do, is very loud. And I don't mean that, you're necessarily shooting loud films, but I mean the infrastructure, the build out, the like what you have to do to create is loud. There's lots of people, there's lots of moving pieces. And I think holding on to something that's a little more quiet. This is my wife rubbing off on me here because we talk about this a lot. But it's like something more quiet, something more insular, something that you hold close to the chest, that you can do with people or by yourself, that keeps you engaged and keeps you passionate, I think is super important.
I love having people over for dinners and barbecues, and it's such a great way to spend an afternoon and connect, because I think a lot of times working in film, you end up at these, awkward coffee dates, and it's like, if it clicks, it clicks, but often it's not the best setting, I think. And when it comes to getting...
it's weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
It's weird.
Yeah. And then like that Instagram account director content had that one meme where it's like the whole row of urinals and the guy at the end's the director, and like the DP walks all the way over and it's like, hey, you want to grab some coffee sometime? And that cut real close.
I'm traditionally a horrifically bad networker. Like, it's just something that always feels very uncomfortable to me. But if you put me in a space where like people are hanging out and there's food and there's drinks and we can just like engage in like casual conversation with no like ulterior motives, that's always when the best connections happen. Those are the best kinds.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
In my opinion. I also think you have a really realistic view of the film industry. And I know I mentioned it really quickly at the beginning, but I've seen stuff you've posted where you've been very transparent, like, hey, I'm not really working. Like, things are really slow. I'm trying to stay engaged. I'm trying to stay busy. You've also been, and we've messaged back and forth about this, because I've been super impressed with a lot of the stuff you've been churning out on the AI side of things with like Midjourney and like concepting and things like that. And in my mind, you've been one of the people who has just kind of embraced new tools as they come out, even though there's a great unknown with AI. And this is all to say, I think your perspective is very realistic, and you're just trying to put things out in the world that give like an honest picture of yourself. I'm just kind of curious because I'm on this mission lately, and this is just where I'm at now, where it's like the older I get, the more I recognize the tools that are available, whether that's social media tools or AI tools or whatever. But it's like my bullshit tolerance is so much lower than it was when I was younger.
I would back it up a little bit. So I think the kind of authenticity part came from a point in my career a few years back where there were a lot of people getting into the DP space. So you'd have these people saying, "Oh, I'm 2 years out of film school, or I worked at a rental house for a year, and now I'm a DP." And with Instagram and with social media, the people that could harness that, I think, had a lot of initial success. And where I found myself was actually I felt like I was in a nicer version of middle school where
oh dude, I hated middle school so much.
So it's like people weren't mean, but I'm not one of the cool kids, like I'm a big nerd. I've always been a big nerd. I can't pose. I can't do this selfies, and I can't look cool on social media. So that was like, okay, I know I can't beat out these like cool young hip DPs. What can I do to differentiate myself? And for me, it was let me lean into the things that I'm good at, which is like the super, super technical stuff. Like I can sit down and read photometrics and read camera specs and do math on spaces and, build my own tools for things. And then I can go to a producer and say, you go ahead and hire that like hip young run and gun DP to shoot whatever out in the woods or something like that. I've done that. I've done my time there. If you want to do a commercial at 1,000 frames a second, you need 20 by 20 foot space lit. You need it properly done. You need someone that knows that, okay, how many 20Ks can you cut? When the producer's like, okay, you can afford 6 and not 8. Like, can we still do it? And I can do the math and say, yes, we can. So I think later on, especially in more recently, it just kind of kept naturally going where I'm like, okay, well, how else am I going to be real? And again, it's just like the posturing on socials. It's not something I vibe with. So I'd rather, I wish I had when I was younger, someone telling me, hey, this is not actually what it's like. You're doing fine. You're not alone, and just keep going. And I didn't have that. So I feel like this is kind of my thing that I can do to help each other out and also just be me,
I feel like the people that I'm trying to reach with this show are a lot like me in the sense of they don't want to feel alone. I feel much better as a creative when I know that there's safety in numbers, so to speak. And so I really respect when people lean into their authentic selves and aren't afraid to share that publicly. And, on the DP side of things, it's like I would have a hard time probably telling you, can we cut to 20Ks and still be okay? But I think where my strength lies, at least in the jobs and the people I've worked with a bunch, is like, I'm certainly not the best DP. And it's like with any creative field, it's like there will always be someone better than you. That's not the point, is to be the best. The point is to find where you fit. And it's like, and people have said it to me straight up. It's like, you're just fun to work with and you're not a dick. And it's like, okay, great.
That goes
like,
so far.
I'll take that.
That goes so far.
I'll take that and run with it. So I think, you did a really great job of really clarifying that question and bringing the authenticity part around. And that really turns into or spins into the identity part that I really wanted to talk about, and something I wrote down when I was, just doing a little bit of like preliminary research and, hey, what can we talk about? I think there's a lot to be said where, and I don't know if it's just a now kind of thing, and this is the time we're living in, but I feel like for longer than we've been working professionals, maybe it's a cultural thing here, but it's like identity seems to be inextricably linked to what you do for a career, right? Or at least that's what we're made to believe. And I've had, I've been to the parties or the networking events or whatever, where it's like, of course, the first question is like, hey, what do you do? And that should be like the defining factor of who you are as a person. But obviously, that's not the case.
Oh, I think it's way too pervasive, to be honest. I think it's like I'm a DP, right? It's like, no, I'm a human that does a bunch of things, and one of them happens to be cinematography, hopefully often. But
yeah,
I didn't like come out of the womb a DP. Like I don't think it's something that we should be so like not obsessed with, but I think if someone leaves the film industry, for example, I don't know if you've had this happen, but I've had a few friends leave over the last few years, mostly like COVID related hardships and whatnot.
Yeah, sure.
And they went into other fields, and the reactions like, oh, like he's no longer a this and that. And I'm just like, well, what's wrong with that? Like they got up, they took a fall, they got up, and they're making something out of their lives, and they're still like people. I used to do this a lot on commercials, where I would be so emotionally attached to that job, and the clients would come in and say, make it brighter, make it this, make it that. And I'd hate the work on it. And I would just like feel it in my core for like weeks afterwards. And, I'm thinking about it. I don't even remember what job that was. So I'm like, maybe it was like a shampoo commercial or something. So,
yeah.
And that's what kind of led me more into like building out a tower and getting into 3D and going back to my painting and drawing roots, because I can still be creative. I identify more as someone that wants to be creative all the time, as opposed to, I am not a creative, and I am not always creative, and I am not just a DP, but I feel it in my core that like, I want to be creative. And sometimes I just don't know how, but that's what drives me.
It's like, these are just facets of who we are as people. But yeah, you're kind of sucked into this like pervasive nature of filmmaking, where it's like, oh yeah, you need to like eat, sleep, and breathe this all the time. And then when you don't, you feel guilty, or you're made to feel guilty. I left music to do this, so it doesn't mean I don't love music anymore. It's just I needed something different at the time. And even now, I find myself in like this questioning period of not wanting to leave the industry, but how can I make things work a little bit better for me? Because, I'm 2 hours north of the city, and it's a slog to go down and back to the city for shoots and things like that. But it's like, how can I like turn things a little bit and find a little slot that maybe fits me a little bit better, to just give me a better quality of life. Like I still want to DP things. I still want to shoot things, but what do those things look like? And, am I saying yes to everything? Knowing that a lot of people are in the same boat, like maybe there's an element of feeling self-conscious, or, a different way to say it is, as a DP, let's look at it from a cinematography side of or like from the cinematographer side of things. I don't hang out with other DPs, and we're always in competition with each other for the jobs. We live in a competitive industry. It's fine. But it's not like I hang out with other DPs and we get to like shoot the shit about this, that, and the other thing. And I think that leads into the community aspect, which is, you founded the cinematography salon. And maybe if you could just give us like a quick 1-2 on what the salon is, what does the community aspect do for us as an industry, specifically from the cinematography side of things?
I think some of this kind of runs in my blood. So when I was a kid, my dad, my dad had a gallery. Well, my parents had a gallery, and it was in the first floor of our house. And we would get up in the morning, walk through the gallery, and go to the kitchen, have breakfast. And he had a whole sculpture garden outside. He had a studio, and I remember him building with my grandfather a wood burning oven and a smoker out of stone and cement, and a big like fire pit kind of situation. And he would throw these epic events with 100, 200 other artist types. And he would be out there cooking. He'd ask his friends that play in a band to come, and and he'd feed everybody, and it was always just like these epic events. And he made, my dad was kind of like the driving force, but my mom was like the foundation. They built in the middle of nowhere, Connecticut, this huge community of artists. Like, I've always been big on getting people together, like chat groups, text groups, whatever method that we had. Remember when I first moved to New York, we'd always be organizing, groups of like 5 to 10 DPs to go out and grab a beer and talk about, how our careers are going and whatnot. How would they light something? Or what kind of rate would you ask for on this thing? Or whatever, in a place that's private and safe, and, producers aren't all over it. And
yeah, man, all the stuff that's like kind of kept under lock and key a lot of times. Yeah.
And so, a lot of people guess about that. But, it just kind of grew up into its own thing somehow. I know there were some members that made a push early on. And I think around the time of the first kind of semi-official party was when I started taking it really seriously and trying to grow it more as a proper community. But, keeping it organic is the key. Like, we're not out there just like pushing to sign up everybody we can. But, for me, it's thinking about the disadvantages that I had coming to where I am now and growing up. When I was in my early 20s, I had like Red User, which was great. A lot of people were on there. Actually, some people that were on there are still giving information on the salon today, which is really cool. Like David Mullen. Shout out to David Mullen.
Oh, that's super cool. I didn't know that.
Like, my father coming up in Czechoslovakia, like, they very much still had the guild system at the time. So he was telling me about how he would apprentice and he would learn the ropes. I think here, there really, outside of maybe TV, there really isn't much of like an apprenticeship system. And when I was that age, I would have loved to have, people of varying places in their careers telling me like, oh, okay, maybe in 5 years you'll encounter this thing, or in 7 years you'll encounter this, or next year maybe this is something for you to watch out for. And so that like 20 to early 30s, I would say, like early to mid 30s range, where you probably don't have some sort of apprenticeship scenario, you're not far enough along in your career to join up with like ASC or something like that, or maybe even just the union, which, to be fair, could be doing a whole lot more educating people. That's a rant for another day.
Rant for another day. Yeah. I'll pick your brain about that some other time.
Exactly. But yeah, so I think, seeing the potential in that was what gave me, the energy to keep going with it and trying to expand it in as many ways as possible. Whether it's events, whether it's working on the Facebook group, building out the website, and now with the podcast. I think a lot of people are getting a ton of value hearing real stories that are kind of untold in the other spaces.
I think it's really taken on a life of its own, which I would assume, having not started a community of anything myself, but is kind of what you want it to do. The idea of community is not that any one person has ownership over it, but it's like this collective, this think tank, whatever you want to call it, where everybody can contribute equally. And it's certainly gained a ton of traction. I'm not a big Facebook person. I'm more of an Instagram guy. And the last I checked, it was like just shy of like 40,000 people following the profile, which is like super impressive, man. And now it's taken on this life of its own. And you have Oren and Peter out on the West Coast who are doing hosting the Salon podcast and just really continuing to build that community, which I think is really important in a creative profession like we are in, which can be simultaneously isolating, yet also forces you into this world where you have to be collaborating with people all the time. It's really interesting that just came out, because as I think about it, it's like, yeah, we have to work with other people all the time, yet our specific role where we live can oftentimes be isolating when we're not on set, right? When we're not on set doing our thing.
On set too. That's another reason why this community was started. Because as a DIT, I would be able to learn from other DPs and work with the camera department, work with the lighting department. That was my film school, was being a DIT. And as soon as I was a DP, it was like, okay, you have to have the answers and you are alone. And so, the desire to even just go on set and shadow another DP or something is huge. but it's not something that happens very often, if much at all.
Yeah. I mean, I think about my beginnings and not having the apprenticeship part, which, apprenticeship still totally exists in like the trades in, like plumbing and electricians and things like that. Like all that apprenticeship stuff is still there, but I feel like it's definitely fallen off in the creative professions. And how many times I've fallen flat on my face on set, like literally just screwed the pooch on some major stuff. And, it's trial by fire, just learn by failing. But boy, I wish I didn't have to fail so epically at the beginning. So, having this community earlier and having, like-minded individuals and people who can like teach from experience and just kind of be a little bit of a guiding light, I think is really great. I know I listened to your interview with Oren and Peter on the Salon podcast just to kind of, freshen up. And there was discussion about maybe a physical space at some point. I'm not holding you to that, but it just begs the question, like, where do you see this going or growing over time?
So we just threw a big party out in LA, and the guy that helped us throw it was the owner of a place called Freestyle Rentals, this guy Mikey. And he was just fantastic to work with. And he and I sat down after the party, after we had recovered a little bit, and we got to talking. He has like a framework for making things happen. And that really put in perspective kind of where I should be going with this. So he has this thing, he calls it DDBC. It's Dream, Design, Build, Connect.
I'm going to write that down right now before I forget it, because I like it. I like it already. Where's my notepad?
And it's
DDBC.
DDBC. So what was funny about it, it's like I've been kind of using that, but having it so structured all of a sudden just made things very clear. And so, I think I talk about a lot of what could happen with the salon. So a lot of those things are in the dream phase. And then the design phase would be, how do you start bringing them to fruition? Now, would I love a physical space? Yes, absolutely. I would love to have a physical space. I would love to be able to provide members with health insurance, like.
Oh, bless your heart.
It's not an insignificant amount of people. It's a lot of people, but these are all ideas, and to implement them takes a lot of hard work, takes capital, takes connections, all these things. And to be honest, like I'm at the point where I'm being stretched so thin, and thank God for some of the people that have come out and helped out. There's this one guy, Topher Hammond, who hit me up out of San Francisco, and he just wanted to help, and he got really involved in prepping the event. So he came down to LA, but he was on with all the different sponsors, helping make sure that things were supposed to be where they're meant to be, making sure that, the emails were followed up on, all the stuff. And so having just that little bit of help made a huge difference. And so if there's going to be a physical space, I mean, how does that look? Like, do I go out of pocket for 6 months while trying to get membership fees from people? Yeah. Is it going to be enough of a physical space or whatever? Or do we find a financier, or do we do a Kickstarter? I don't know. Like, if anybody has answers or ideas, like I'm open to hearing them. I would love to make all these things happen. I think if you look how far everything's come over the last few years, we've grown a lot, we've added a lot, and none of these things are impossible. But I do feel like these are big leaps in ways that, starting the Instagram account or starting the podcast was not.
And maybe it's kind of cyclical, right? You go through the 4 steps, and then just like anything else, it's cyclical. And what I find really inspiring is where there's the desire to be able to offer community something that's really tangibly useful. Like, whether it becomes a reality or not, just the fact that you're saying things like, it would be great to offer people health insurance is such a huge statement to make, because it's you identifying parts of a system that you're involved with that are broken or hard to exist within. And I'm not a union guy.
Looking at you, Local 600.
I was just going to say, I'm not a union guy, but my tumultuous back and forth on whether it's worth it for me to try and go down that road is literally, how much do I have to be working away from my family to qualify for health insurance?
An unhealthy amount.
And
That's the answer, is an unhealthy
an
amount.
unhealthy amount.
Yeah.
And we're not going down that rabbit hole. But the point I'm trying to make is this dream you had of like having a community where you could just talk offline about, you know, the things you want to talk about, ask the questions you want to get answers to. And now it's growing. And now you can start asking deeper questions and looking at things like, hey, is this actually a possibility at some point in the future? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But just the fact that that conversation, even in your own mind, is happening, I think speaks really well of what you've built and what you're continuing to build. So, you know, kudos to you, dude. That's
Thanks.
it's really, really cool. It's really, really cool. And, you know, I do this podcast all on my own, and it is like a grind and a half. So just the fact that you've been able to pull together like these events with sponsors and blah, 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 blah. I mean, of course, it's wonderful you have people coming out of the woodwork to help you, but my God, I know it's a lot of work. This week's show sponsor is Cine Kit List. Cine Kit List is an online community for video production pros that provides its members with exclusive access to discounts on pro video equipment you won't find anywhere else. Cine Kit List also offers something no one else in the industry does: exclusive cart quotes for any purchase. Build your cart on Adorama's website, send it to the Cine Kit List team, and they'll quote you exclusive pricing on everything in the cart. Get access to high-end B2B pricing just like a large rental house or studio would, and the service is 100% free. Come join the vibrant community of video professionals to get access to this deal and many more by searching at Cine Kit List on Facebook and Instagram. Cine Kit List, putting the best on sets for less.
And just to clarify, it's not people coming out of the woodwork. It's a handful of people at best. And, you know, I'm doing these things. I'm raising the money. I'm spending, like the holiday party we did last year, it was a full-time job for over a month. I was on this thing for at least 40 hours a week. And, you know, raised the money from the sponsors, went in person, got the space, was physically there setting up the space for 2 days ahead of time, came back the next day and helped break down. You know, and there's no money left over. Like, this is totally unpaid. Like, all of it goes to throw in the events. So, you know, again, it's like I'm in it for the community. I'm in it to, you know, help people as much as possible, get people together. I love that. Would love to also see this grow to a point where, you know, I'm not bending over backwards just to make things happen so someone can show up, be like, oh, cool, great party. You know?
Yeah. Well, to clarify, very small amount of people coming out of very tiny amount of wood to help you out with this.
And I appreciate every single one of them.
Yeah, totally. I do want to talk creative now that we've talked about a lot of deeper things, but after all, we are creative professionals. It would be a disservice to not talk creativity here. Sure. And one thing you mentioned to me over email that you were interested in talking about, which I'm so on board with, is your work on genre films. So I've seen your genre film work on the pieces you did with Mike Pecci, so 12KM and Who's There. But talk to me about genre film as it pertains to like your interest level, and like what gets you out of bed in the morning to go, you know, work on horror, sci-fi, action, you know, this kind of stuff that it, in my mind, is really a lot harder to achieve than just lighting, you know, a two-person conversation or something like that.
I mean, I love genre films because it makes me feel like a kid. You know, like I'm just playing.
That is the right answer. That is the right answer.
I'm just playing, you know. It's like we when we get to do our jobs, it's a really cool job. Like, we get to play make believe for, you know, for adults. I mean, it's rad. And I, you know, I've never been a big fan of movies that reflect real life. Right? Like, for me, that's a documentary. Like, I'd rather watch a documentary and hear like a crazy real story as opposed to a made up story that's, you know, meant to sound real. And, you know, I think I won't name specifics, but like movies where people are arguing about their marriage or something like that. It's like, that's fine. My parents got divorced. I saw plenty of that. Like, not something I need to re-experience, but I do want to get up and, you know, being able to go onto a set, and maybe it's like a horror set or an action set, and there's, you know, things that exploded, or someone's wearing a rubber suit as a monster or something like that. I mean, that stuff to me is just so much fun. But also, like, those stories can also reflect the real life. And I think by telling it through like a fantastical point of view, it makes it accessible, and you can really think about that, right? Like I look back at it like Alien, right? That whole series. That's one of my favorite world building exercises. How does this creature that comes on, like gets on you and lays an egg, and then it bursts out of your chest, and then has that whole interaction with Ripley and whatnot, like how does that relate to people's lives and struggles? That's the kind of interesting thing. And everybody's going to have a slightly different answer because it's not definitive.
It's really funny. I always get a kick out of like the really cerebral film folks who are like, oh, this represents his struggle with blah, blah, blah. And if you talk to the person who wrote it or directed it or shot it, it's like, we just thought it looked cool. And we
Exactly.
went with it. Like we were just messing around. But I think, not to cut you off, and I want you to continue, but I think that's the best possible answer I could imagine for why you get out of bed in the morning for genre films. It's because it makes you feel like a kid, man. Like I'm still, I'm in my 40s. Underneath all the age and the adult filters and stuff like that, I still have a wild imagination. I want to like play in spaceships or whatever. And I think it's a really good excuse to tap into that again.
My wife's cousin has these 3 amazing daughters. And, I've seen them grow up over the last 7 years. And, even today, it's just like how they can just take something and like this little shovel. It's not a shovel. It's, it's a magic wand or something. It's not a little car. It's like I'm building a whole scene there. And they just live these worlds in their heads. And it's just so free. They're not trying to think about how they're going to make money off of it, how they're going to turn it into a business, or how other people are going to react to like what they did. They're just making because they want to make it, and I think as I get older, like I'm becoming more aware of that, and I want to recreate that as much as possible.
That's really beautiful, man. What was your first foray into what we would consider like a genre film?
I think for me, probably the kind of defining genre moment was doing 12 km with Mike. I mean, that was
cool.
Now 8 or 9 years ago. So that's, right there at like right as I feel like certain things were starting to take off.
I've seen the film. It does not suck. It's visually so cool. You spend the majority of the film in this one specific setting in both films. And then towards the end, you wind up in just like a totally different environment, feel, space, like whatever you want to describe that as. I can certainly relate to something like Poltergeist or whatever. But that's really cool that's kind of how you started down the road in genre stuff, was on those shorts with him. And now, going down the road a little bit further, you're working with name talent. I know you did Agent Game, was starring Mel Gibson. You've done The Last Thing Mary Saw and Black Friday, which I'm a little less familiar with. So maybe you can kind of like clue us in on those 3 films a little bit. And then I do want to kind of talk about what you did with Creepbox, even though that's not out, but getting to play and getting to experiment and working with homemade filters and funky lenses and things like that.
Well, I can't say it's not intimidating. Like,
sure.
It really is. Like, I mean, Mel Gibson is a great example. I mean, he's older than my dad. Like, he's been doing movies for longer than I've been alive. And, he's not only a prolific actor, but a prolific director and filmmaker. And so to have someone like him walk on set, I mean, it's, the shadow, it casts a shadow over everyone. So the only thing I can tell myself in my head while I'm trying to control my breathing to get into the day is like, just remember, they're also people. They're also people, and they want to be treated like normal people, and just talk to them like you would talk to anybody else. Yep. And when I can convince myself to do that, when I don't get too nervous or start treating them like they're better than, it's usually really just the same thing as working with anybody else. And, I think you always have the X factor, famous or not, like someone's going to suck and someone's going to be great. So, and, in Mel's case, he was just really lovely to work with. And, people always bring up like his past and the other stuff, but that's, as far as I'm concerned, as a collaborator and a filmmaker and, having shot me as a DP, him as an actor, nothing but professionalism and, just getting the day done. And he was always, curious about the camera and the lenses and wanted to talk to me about that. So I
Yeah,
had a
I
great
think
experience. Yeah.
it's like, first, if you want to call it intimidation or nerves or whatever, I think a little bit of that is good. Keeps you on your toes. If you were totally relaxed all the time, if it were me, I probably wouldn't do as good a work unless I was maybe a little nervous. It's like it keeps you honest, right? But also, once you get into the project with someone like that, and they're just really great to collaborate with professionally. It's my opinion that, like, you leave your baggage at the door when you come onto set. So it's like you're there to make art or something creative or whatever you want to classify the project you're working on as, even if it's just we were making something fun to entertain people. It's like, I've got baggage, you got baggage, Mel Gibson's got baggage. Doesn't matter. Check it at the door, because you're there to make something collectively, and all the other stuff doesn't really matter. And then also, you worked on Black Friday with Bruce Campbell, who I know you he's an institution. I'll put it to you that way.
Yes.
He's an institution. What was it like working with Bruce Campbell?
I'm sorry if other actors hear this, but I think Bruce Campbell may have been my favorite actor to work with.
Right on.
I mean, I'm talking like the difference between one, two, three, four. I mean, it's tiny, but he like, one, I love the fact that he just can't turn the camp off. Like
He's really just like that all the time.
Whether he's Bruce Campbell or Ash or, the manager role in Black Friday, whatever it is, he's always the same person all the time. It is
amazing,
spectacular. And then not only that, he's incredibly professional. So when he would get called to set, he would be the first one on set. And as the other actors would arrive, he would give them shit for not being there as quickly.
I love it.
So
I absolutely,
and just
I love it.
Nailed like every take. Hilarious. I mean, set a great tone for everybody. And this being a movie pre-vaccine, middle of COVID with tons of restrictions, it was really just lovely to have that kind of energy on set, because it was hard. It was really hard making a movie during that time.
Yeah, and so to kind of wrap up what it's like to work with talent, it's like, sure, it's cool that you get to say, hey, I've worked with this person, I've worked with this person, I can put that on a resume or a CV, and it's like something that rides along with me career-wise. But like, what does it do for you as a creative? I always set these goals for myself when I was first starting out. It's like, oh, if I could just work on this type of job, I'll be satisfied. Or if I could just make this amount of money a day, I'll be satisfied. It's bullshit. It doesn't happen. I mean, you set these goals and you rocket past them and you're onto this, that, and the other thing. And obviously, anybody who gets into filmmaking, somewhere in there, they want to be working with named talent and, blah, blah, blah. Like, what does that do for you, whether it's like confidence level going into the next project or whatever? I'm just curious about your thoughts. If you have any, if you don't, that's also fine.
So I would say creative wise, the way that, the way that name talent, and I'll say that name talent will usually get there because they're good, like, sure. I'm sure there are plenty of people that are out there that are, maybe they're wealthy or they're like a musician that's moving over or whatever. But for the most part, I would say you don't become a famous actor unless you're actually good at your job. And
well, that bodes well for everybody. Yeah.
Right? And so I would, in the same way that you might have a rock star AC or like the world's best gaffer, talent does that same thing, but in front of the camera, right? Like, you don't have to worry about that person. You don't have to think about them messing up certain things. Like, they're professional, they know their lines, and they deliver great performances. And really, that's what we're there for. We're there for a story, and they're the ones that are, they're telling the story in front of us. And, it's like, it's really disappointing when you get a really bad actor that you just have to struggle through their takes. But when you get really good ones, I mean, I've missed like, slider push-in cues during monologues because they're doing it so well that I'm just like, I'm in the eyepiece,
so engaged,
and I'm just watching the performance,
I feel that. And that's actually a really nice place to be when you're in a space where you're witnessing something happen in real time that you actually forget to do your job.
Exactly.
Which is fine. So to come at creativity from another angle and go back to the play, right? Go back to being playful and creative. It's not out yet, but you shot Creepbox. You like to experiment. You like to try new things. And you told me you were using some homemade filters and funky lenses. So I want you to feed my inner camera dweeb and tell me about those things as well. So what is Creepbox as far as you could tell us?
So Creepbox, I'd say, is kind of heavily influenced by, not necessarily influenced by, but reminds me of somewhere between like The Conversation and Ex Machina.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, really, really great premise. Very heady in terms of, what near future technology could look like, but everything's still kind of kept in this like weird, Tarantino-esque, like I don't know what decade it is kind of scenario. The director and writer, Patrick Beesmans, he and I go way, way back. Like we started out on commercials and then got into shorts and music videos. And we've been dying to make a feature together ever since. And it was one of those amazing collaborations where it's just like everyone's there to get this thing done no matter what. I mean, it wasn't, it wasn't a big budget film or anything. So we definitely had to be creative in how we'd work together and how we'd make this come to life. But the fact that we could get on set and barely speak a word to each other and just start setting things up and know that we're on the same page, and creatively we know that we want to go to the same place, and also having that trust where I could say things to him and he knowing that like he would not get upset about them, right? Like I can make suggestions to him that are related to directing or performance or whatever, and he can make suggestions to me that are related to lighting and camera work and suggesting shots. And I don't feel at all like we're encroaching on each other's territory. We're both there to make a better project.
Yeah.
So for me, that was really beautiful. And how many films? I think I've shot like 10 or 11 films, and it was my first one in New York City, actually, which is kind of ironic.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. You live in New York and you hardly ever work in New York.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people are like that.
But I mean, the big thing for me was that I knew we couldn't differentiate ourselves with huge lighting setups, with gigantic locations. We were very lucky to get the talent that we got. Like, they were fantastic. So I think that's kind of like the biggest aspect there. So we were talking and I'm like, okay, what can we do to set this film apart? So a lot of it was vintage funky lenses. We got this big old zoom. We added in all these zoom shots. And then, the main character, he's kind of going through this psychological thing. We don't know if he's hearing voices or if he's hearing this technology. We don't know like where he is mentally. So I wanted to design some of my own filters. I didn't want to get anything from the rental house. So I went on Amazon and started playing around with stuff. I got some clear filters. Actually, this was my favorite one. I got these 8.5 by 11 magnifying sheets that, people overlay them onto documents so that they can read them. So they're plastic, and I cut them into 4x5, and then one into like an inch wider than 4x5. Okay. So when it's clipped to the front of the matte box, it kind of warps. And it acts almost like a diopter. So it only really works a lot for like close-ups and like closes of faces, or in this case, we have this device. So a lot of close-ups of this device, and it pulls the light, it smears the image. It's wild. It's like, it's not anything you've seen before in a movie. I can guarantee you that. And,
awesome.
And having someone like Patrick, and also our producer was very kind of hands-off creatively in that sense. Not that he wasn't involved creatively, but he let us do our thing. And, having that trust from the team to say like, all right, let's try it. Let's put it on. And I remember the first time I snapped it into the front of the matte box, everyone on set's just like, what the fuck is this? And then the images start coming out on the monitor. And everyone's like, oh, whoa, shit, that's awesome. So...
Dude, you're playing, you're painting, you're in a safe space to do so. And that's such a cool place to be. I resonate with that too, where it's not all the time, but on the occasion that I can run a camera team that's on the same page from the get-go. It's like a really freeing space to be able to welcome in ideas from whoever. And like, I don't care. I try to be one of those cinematographers who's like, best idea wins. Like, who's got the best idea? Like, I can curate those as far as the camera department goes and like make the best collective decision. And I think it's really freeing in that regard because I don't want to be a dictator, and you clearly don't want to be a dictator. You just want to play an experiment and like make the best thing possible. But yeah, it takes a certain amount of balls to clip some funky Amazon plastic onto the front of a lens on a full feature movie. But I'm glad it all worked out.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few filters I made that when we were looking at them on set, they just like weren't doing it. So, you know, it's playing around, like you said, and you know, I know that like we trust each other enough where he could be like, yeah, that sucks. I'm like, yeah, you know what, you're right, that does suck. Let's not use it.
Yeah, it just goes back to, I mean, it just goes back to the childhood thing, man. It's like you're literally just tapping into that, like, oh, what would happen if I did this? And just maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But if it doesn't, you try the next thing, and that's a really cool space to be in.
Totally.
Yeah, man. I want to wrap this up, but like, what's next for you? I'm just so curious when I talk to people, like what the future looks like for them, and not necessarily just from what the next job's going to be.
Terrified and in the middle of an existential crisis. So I'm hoping that's the answer you wanted.
Cool. Well, I mean, not cool, but why terrified? Why terrified?
Well, I mean, a lot of people haven't been working. You know, it's been slow for me as well. Like, this is not a new thing. It's been the better part of the year for most people, which sucks. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody's hurting to some degree. You know, I don't know when that's going to be over. That part, I'm sure it'll, you know, work itself out sooner or later. You know, the advertisers have to spend their marketing budgets, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
You know, the big thing for me, it's, you mentioned earlier, obviously I'm very into tech and trying to be on the forefront of tech. This whole AI thing, it's, you know, on the one hand, it's a huge sort of creative tool in my mind, especially something like Midjourney, where it kills the step of empty page syndrome. Yeah. That's what I like about it. You know, it's the equivalent of a writer just staring at the laptop or the, you know, piece of paper. And, you know, for me, it's like, okay, well, what am I going to do for this project? Or even not a project, even I can get up in the morning and just be like, I've got these images in my head, but like, I just want to put them out. And, you know, it's the way that you can be a little more involved in your craft without, like you said earlier, having to get a crew together and like go, you know, it doesn't work that way. It's like, what can you do on your own? Sure. I get that. Yeah. It gets the juices flowing. Totally. But at the same time, ever since it came out, I haven't turned on my tower for 3D work, you know, because I look at that, I'm like, wow, my skills in 3D were getting better, but this is just so much easier to generate stuff that I would have spent days and days and days working on one image, and I can just crank these out, which then leads to the next question. Okay, well, like, how soon does it get good enough to do 24 frames a second? And we're already seeing that, you know, Gen 1, Gen 2, you know, the writer's strike right now with ChatGPT, et cetera, et cetera. I want to, you know, my mission is to always be on the forefront because I don't want to get left behind. I mean, this goes back to DIT days, you know, teaching like old school DPs how to use digital cameras and then fighting me this every step of the way. You know, it also goes back to the childhood, like being a child thing. Like, I don't ever want to stop being curious. No, you shouldn't. But at the same time, I do think this is a huge existential risk to, I mean, name the job, right? Like, unless you're a mason or a carpenter or something, like I don't know where it goes. And that's been part of the last kind of year of like dread, you know? Yeah. It's definitely a bigger conversation. It's a real thing. And I think, to go way back to the beginning of this conversation, I think something that inspired me asking you, or rather saying that you had a realistic view of the industry, and that spun into our whole authenticity part. It's like you are, as it pertains to AI, from what I've seen, embracing the parts that you're able to make it work for you and to try and stay at the forefront, even though it's a big unknown and that causes an existential crisis for tons of people, you, me, whatever. You're trying to evolve as things evolve, which I commend you for. It's like, I remember when I was a kid, I was like,
I'm always going to understand technology. That's, I don't know what my parents are talking about.
I mean, it's like when the internet first came out, did you think that being an influencer would be a job?
Absolutely not.
All right. So, or did you think that you'd be getting your supplies at home and like anything under the sun that you wanted? Did you think you'd be getting it through an online bookstore?
Certainly not.
Right. So that's how I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, there's going to be things that happen in the future that will be different, and I don't know what they are. I just hope that there's a role for me, and I hope it's a role that I enjoy.
Yeah.
And being left behind, I think putting your head in the sand or saying, hey, we're going to regulate this away, we're going to sign, contracts and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong. Like, I support the writers. Like, ChatGPT is a shit writer. Like, we need our writers to,
totally.
give
I
us
agree.
the real creativity. But at the pace that things are developing and the way that, you see companies posturing, is there a world where the writers' jobs are actually safe? Is there a world where my job is actually safe? And I'm asking these questions because I want to try and find an answer. I don't want to just ignore the whole thing and then get blindsided.
That is totally the right attitude, in my opinion. If you sweep it under the rug, it's still going to be there later. You're not going to get rid of the problem. So I think searching for and finding answers is the way to be.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it. Where can people learn more about you online?
So my website is davidkruta.com. My Instagram is @dkruta, DKRUTA. I also run Cinematography Salon. So that's cinematographysalon.com or @Cinematography Salon on Instagram. And the podcast is on there too. So easy to find in those locations.
Right on. David Kruta, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you. Appreciate having me.
All right, everybody, there you go. That was my interview with cinematographer David Kruta. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be sure to list all of his links in the show notes so you can check out what he's up to. Also, coming up in the near future, I sat down with director Mike Pecci, so we'll be able to close the loop on his collaboration with Kruta and get an insight into some of the short form work they've done together. If you want to find out more about this show, just head over to nosetpath.com or find us on Instagram @nosetpathpodcast. And if you want to learn more about me, your host, Drew English, you can find me at drewenglish.com or on Instagram @drewenglish with 2 H's at the end. And if you head to my website, I also have links to my Twitter and LinkedIn there as well. That's it for now. I hope you're enjoying your summer, and we'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.